The honourable member for Halifax Needham.
Mr. Speaker, I want to start by thanking my colleague, the MLA for Queen Shelburne. Last week he asked me if I was ready for this moment and said, "You'll never forget your first speech." So I'm hereby blaming him. So I'm blaming him for the unusual case of anxiety and writer's block I experienced over the past weekend. But it is a pleasure to rise in the House and to share with you why I am so honoured to represent Halifax Needham. Many of you probably know it. Maybe in recent years you've enjoyed a restaurant meal on Gottingen Street or on Agricola Street. My most frequent haunts in the Hydrostone Market are the ones I discovered in the 1990s when I first lived in Halifax, a Newfoundland student who desperately wanted to get away to a big city that was neither too big nor too far away from home. And of course, Halifax became home. But more specifically, the north end of Halifax became home. I spent time away after my undergrad at Dal, but the best decision I ever made was to move back. Not because I had a job, not because my family was here, but because Halifax felt like the perfect size for me, a place where I could look forward to bumping into people 2 times and then 3, and then often enough again until we became friends. And the next best decision I made was to buy a house on Fuller Terrace, pretty much smack dab in the middle of Halifax Needham, on my own. I was so lucky. It was 2003, and I was almost finished my master's degree. I didn't have a job, just casual freelance work, but I had a strong feeling that I needed to claim this place. I bought the cheapest house on the Halifax Peninsula that didn't need to be torn down. The roof was ready to give, but I got that done just before Hurricane Juan hit. My parents worried that the house was a lemon. Though the mortgage was small by today's standards, it was still more money than they had ever owed. But I knew Fuller Terrace. When I briefly lived in the South End during my master's, I'd regularly make the trek to Julian's in the Hydrostone on my bike, and I always made a point to travel north along Fuller Terrace, enjoy the shade of that tree canopy, and envy the neighbors talking to each other on sidewalks and front porches. I will ever be mindful of my privilege. My parents co-signed on that mortgage and gave me a loan to beef up the down payment. I'd graduated in 1995 without student debt, and my parents and scholarships helped through my master's too. Lucky, not deserved, just lucky. I became a regular at the North End Diner. I got invited to a birthday party when my next-door neighbor turned 4. And I got interested in the dynamics of the bigger neighborhood around me. In 2004, I produced a CBC radio documentary for Maritime Magazine that looked at Joseph Howe and Oxford schools and how African Nova Scotian parents, teachers, and children felt about those schools. It was called Of Color and Class. I was young in my journalism career, and it would not stand up as great documentary making. But in the course of it, I met Marcus James at the North Branch Library, who is still a community leader, and I interviewed Maureen MacDonald in her constituency office at the Bloomfield Centre. Fast forward 12 years, I don't live on Fuller Terrace, but I rent that sweet house to a woman who's not very different from me as I was in 2003, but would have a very hard time buying in Halifax Needham. Joseph Howe School has survived the chopping block a couple of times and is now at full enrollment thanks to an influx of more than 50 new Syrian children. And a couple of weeks ago, I met with the principal to talk about the sad state of its outdoor play space. The Bloomfield Centre has been shuttered for a few years now, but thanks to the continued energy and leadership from residents who live on Fuller Terrace and Bloomfield and nearby, there are some clear principles for how that site should be redeveloped, influenced by the community. And I'm still learning the dynamics of my neighborhood. In January of 2014, I began to convene a monthly meeting of nonprofit and public sector and social enterprise superheroes of all sorts who work in Halifax Needham. For a long time, that meeting, called the North End Roundtable, happened at Veith House, but it grew and grew until the boardroom was not large enough, and now Marcus James chairs the roundtable at the Halifax North Memorial Library, known affectionately unto all as the North Branch. Through those meetings, and I took notes at maybe 24 of them, I got to know Halifax Needham in a unique way. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to share with the members here a virtual tour of Halifax Needham by highlighting some of the organizations that I got to know through the North End Roundtable, traveling north to south. At the far north, of course, there is Africville and the Africville Museum. Here is an organization that honors the story of some of Halifax's longest-standing and most resilient residents. Africville is a National Historic Site, yet the museum is not on transit and there is no safe pedestrian route to get there. These are real challenges that the leadership and board of the Africville Museum face as they try to develop programming that will appeal to Africville descendants, to Nova Scotians wanting to learn our whole history, and to visitors to Nova Scotia. Up over the hill, tucked in at the back of the Nova Scotia Community College IT campus, which I had the pleasure of visiting this morning during their open house, is the Lead Street Child Care Centre, one of several valued nonprofit child care centres in Halifax Needham. Like the Needham Child Care Centre, located in Needham Recreation Centre, the Lead Street Child Care Centre saw its funding from the province decrease this year. Next door, I'll briefly mention the church that I attend, St. Margaret's of Scotland. Clergy and volunteer from a number of churches, including Mulgrave Park United Baptist and the now closed United Memorial, participated in the North End Roundtable because with large facilities and dwindling congregations, they want to strengthen community and be strengthened by community. This fall, St. Margaret's of Scotland started the first phase of their community garden, several beds of which will be gardened by NSCC students, one by the Lead Street Child Care Centre, and another will be dedicated to the food bank at St. Mark's. Newcomers to Halifax will garden some beds as well through a connection with iSands. That community garden is the newest in Halifax Needham, and that makes it, if I'm not missing any, the 9th, including the amazing school gardens at St. Joseph A. McKay and St. Catherine's. One of the longest established gardens is next to the water tower between Roby Street and Prescott Street. And just across Prescott Street is the Prescott Group, a nonprofit organization that works with 167 clients with intellectual disabilities and a wide network of partners in the private sector who provide employment in the community. Private sector companies hire Prescott Group to do contracts for silk screening, sorting of second-hand goods and electronics, sewing of customized bags, and more. When I was executive director at Veith House, we bought our baked goods at Prescott Group. For the people who go there every day to work in the kitchen or in the sewing room or in another workroom, Prescott Group is both a workplace and a community. For the management of Prescott Group, the board and its executive director, knowing that they are the community for those clients is a great responsibility. And they have been searching for more than a decade for a long-term home because they cannot afford the space that they currently lease and which will eventually come on the market. And that is a common theme across Halifax Needham as property prices increase. Where are people going to end up? Now back towards the harbour from the water tower. And let's stop for a moment at Needham Centre. Needham Centre belongs to the Halifax Regional Municipality. It's a hub in Halifax Needham and an incredibly important crossroads. Its summer camps provide employment for dozens of local people, not to mention affordable fun childcare for parents in Halifax Needham. And if it weren't for the Needham pool, fewer North End Halifax kids would learn to swim. Some of my best chats with residents happen on the pool deck. A large and loyal group of seniors attend aquasize classes there in the morning. Ever since I got engaged in my community, I've heard that Needham is going to close. or that Halifax will rebuild it but without the pool. As a politician for that area, it's a no-brainer to commit to fighting for that community centre with a pool included. Just down the hill is Mulgrave Park, part of Metro Regional Housing. Inside several converted units is the Mulgrave Park Caring and Learning Centre, a family resource centre. Last week, the minister responsible for community services spoke about the importance of family resource centres and taking a preventative approach to child welfare. I wholeheartedly agree, and I'm so glad to now have the Parenting Journey program in Halifax Needham, based at the Mulgrave Park Caring and Learning Centre. Phoenix Youth and Community Centre occupies another couple of units in Mulgrave Park and offers pre-employment training, mentorship, homework help, and more for youth in the park. A kilometre away in the Hydrostone, Phoenix Outreach offers counselling for children aged 11 and up, along with their parents. But before we climb up from the harbour, I must mention We Care, another nonprofit childcare centre, but with a difference. We Care offers childcare for babies to preschoolers with special needs and also typically developing children. It employs a part-time physiotherapist, a part-time occupational therapist, speech-language pathologist, and resource teacher on site. And enrollment at We Care means parents can go back to work, do normal life, instead of running back and forth to the IWK Health Centre. Children get therapy where it makes sense. They learn to feed themselves at snack time with their friends. Yet, while those children come off the caseloads of IWK therapists, We Care does not get any funding from the Department of Health. And so its management, the executive director, and its board fundraise constantly and to exhaustion to provide those therapeutic services for young Nova Scotians with special needs. Just next door, of course, is Veith House, a neighbourhood hub with a part-time preschool that's been operating for 45 years, a supervised access program that is essential to the provision of family justice in Nova Scotia, a trustee program for clients on income assistance, a community kitchen, a boardroom with regular drop-in by donation yoga classes, a coffee pot that is always on, a roster of dedicated, generous, kind-hearted volunteers, and amazing staff. That's where I was executive director until August 1st. Mr. Speaker, it is still the most challenging job I have ever had, and I pledge to never forget how hard and how creatively leaders in the nonprofit sector work. Up the steep hill and over a couple of blocks to Ward 5 Community Centre, Executive Director Doug McDonald rarely makes it to the North End Roundtable because he's probably prepping a lunch for a crowd of Halifax Needham seniors or tidying up after breakfast for a crowd of Halifax Needham children before they head to school at St. Joseph A. McKay. I've eaten 2 meals there since I was elected on August 30th. Around the corner, tucked upstairs in the Russell Food Building, is Wonderneath. I can't say enough about Wonderneath. It's a place run by artists where every person who walks through the door is welcomed and supported to discover their own creativity. There are snacks. There are young and old, single and coupled, black and white and Indigenous and new immigrant people enjoying themselves, engaged in the work of being human, silk screening and sewing and needle felting and drilling and also visiting with each other. Everything about Wonderneath is perfect, except that the artists don't make a living wage. They could be kicked out of space if the building is sold for redevelopment. And then where are artists supposed to find studio space in Halifax Needham anymore? And it's on a second floor, so it's not accessible. Okay, I'm almost at Almond Street. Let's jump to Northwood. It's another nonprofit. It's an important provider of low-income housing in Halifax Needham. It's an innovator. In 2015, it opened the first mental health program within a seniors facility in Atlantic Canada. Northwood, of course, also operates a long-term care facility. And as in all long-term care facilities, management and staff are doing the best they can to provide a dignified life for seniors. something that has been made more difficult by the cuts brought in by this government. Mr. Speaker, the management, board, and staff of Northwood deserve our respect and our gratitude. I'm crossing North Street now. Metro nonprofit housing is at the corner of Buddy Day and Gottingen Street. Over 100 people come through the doors on an average morning at their drop-in. With 6 buildings nestled into neighborhoods, Metro Nonprofit provides 86 tenants with affordable, supportive housing using a unique approach that emphasizes community development within its buildings. They also help people move from homelessness to house through Halifax and Dartmouth Housing Help and support more than 300 people with their trusteeship program. Across Gottingen Street is the Uniac Centre for Community Development and Centerline Studios. These, again, are spaces where people can use their creativity, develop their entrepreneurship, be mentored, and be mentors. Lindell Smith, the new municipal councillor for District 8, was a co-founder of Centerline Studios, along with Sobaz Benjamin. These are superheroes of our community, showing leadership, holding young people in nurturing relationships to let them imagine paths into a positive future. Around the corner on Uniacke Street is the North End Parent Resource Centre, another family resource centre, so important. Nearby is the Community Y, where Halifax Needham residents can access employment counselling, and there's a lot of basketball. But more importantly for kids, this is a space where they learn that they are important, that they are loved. Hope blooms on Cornwallis Street now, but with their garden and greenhouse down on Brunswick. Hope blooms is an inspiration to people across Halifax, Needham, and beyond. As Jessie Jollymore, the founder of Hope Blooms, often says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. This summer, in the middle of my campaign, I had the chance to attend a movie screening organized by the amazing North Branch Library, which I'll talk about on another occasion, where the movie was projected onto the side of Hope Bloom's greenhouse. Before the screening, young entrepreneurs sold salad greens by the compostable box. They'd grown this food in Halifax, Needham. The end product of Hope Blooms, it's not just salad dressing or fresh vegetables, it's confidence and it's pride. It's young people who are at ease, serving customers, expressing their ideas, working collaboratively for long-term goals. Hope Blooms has inspired other nonprofits to look to social enterprise. At Veith House, I was a co-founder of Future Roots, which recruits, trains, and supervises North End youth to provide services like yard maintenance, weeding, and snow shoveling to older neighbours in Halifax Needham. And I'll happily give a shout out to Common Good Solutions, who the Minister responsible for business introduced earlier today, because they were crucial in helping us get that social enterprise started. Back on Gottingen Street, the North End Community Health Centre is a crucial agency in Halifax Needham with a multidisciplinary team and more than 24,000 patient encounters a year. In particular, I highlight MOSH, Mobile Outreach Street Health, which collaborates with other nonprofit agencies like ADSOM, Direction 180, Shelter Nova Scotia, and Metro Nonprofit Housing to provide appropriate, flexible care for some of the most vulnerable Nova Scotians. I thank the Minister of Health and the Nova Scotia Health Authority for working with the North End Community Health Centre to arrive at a resolution to the centre's failing roof, a long-term lease at the Major General Donald J. McDonald building, announced last month. Mr. Speaker, there are still other agencies, too, that deserve mention in Halifax Needham. The Black Business Initiative, Bryony House, the Youth Project, LOVE, the Delmore Buddy Day Learning Institute, the Black Educators, Family SOS, and all the ones I'm forgetting. The nonprofit sector is vibrant and responsive and delivers value to Nova Scotians. It provides meaningful employment, valuable volunteer and training opportunities, and services that Nova Scotians need. And I haven't mentioned all the other participants in the North End Roundtable, as public sector and private sector partners and individual volunteers have also sat around that table. I want to thank in particular the United Way of Halifax which supported my part-time salary when I first convened the North End Roundtable as part of a project of the Community Justice Society, and which supports many of the agencies I mentioned. I could give another virtual tour of small independent businesses in Halifax Needham. Those are businesses and entrepreneurs that I patronize and which support by donating, by volunteering, by serving on boards of directors, the nonprofit sector. At the level of our neighborhood, we work together. I worry about the fate of nonprofits and artists which may be priced out of Halifax Needham. I worry about small businesses which have seen their property taxes skyrocket out of all proportion with any increase in their revenues. I worry about renters who have seen their rents go up and affordable units disappear and who pay more each year on incomes that are fixed or just low. I worry about young people and young families and newcomers who will not have the opportunity I did to make Halifax Needham their home. I will channel that worry into work in this legislature, in my constituency, to leverage the power that exists in good ideas, strong relationships, and collaboration to address the needs that exist in Halifax Needham, and to add my effort to the efforts of so many Halifax Needham nonprofit and volunteer superheroes to protect and build the vibrancy of the district that I am so honored to represent. Thank you very much.